Gary,
Welcome to our New York Giants preservation meeting for tonight, Thursday, March 21st, 2024. We have the wonderful baseball writer and historian Charlie Vascellaro, who's going to be speaking about the Giants being in Arizona for spring training, both as the New York Giants and the San Francisco Giants. He will also be talking about a Giants Road Scholar program that many of you might be interested in to visit Arizona next year, and also about Scottsdale Stadium, the history of that in a museum. So we're going to get to Charlie in a few minutes. I just want to go over a couple of other things. Next week will be a Wednesday meeting, and the reason we're having it on Wednesday is because next Thursday is opening day. I didn't want to bother you guys because we're all going to be watching the Giant game. Roger is very much an authority on the Giants minor league system. A lot of you will have questions about guys who you all thought would be on the team, and they're going to probably be winding up in the minor leagues, and other guys who will be available hopefully this year to help the Giants out. Couple of other things. If you donated to the Willie Mays Say Hey Fund, should have received a thank you note. Very classy. That is aid. Renee sent out to everybody. She hand wrote every one of them. Just a great move. I will be doing double duty tonight. I'm the guest speaker in a Sabre meeting at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time with the Lefty O'Doul and Dusty Baker chapters. They asked me to speak about my book. If anybody's interested in that, they could email me and I'll send out the link to you. Also on Saturday, the Casey Singles Sabre group is having their live meeting, and they asked me to come as well to sell the book. So if you're interested in that and you're in New York, you could email me. I sent out the the link to that from Ernestine Miller, who's big in Sabre, and Dave Littman is also very big in that group. So we hope to see some of you there if you can make it.
Gary, my phone's not working. My camera's not working, but I'm here. Okay.
All right, Frank. Thank you so much for that. In the meantime, it is my privilege to welcome Charlie Vascellaro to the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting. Charlie, like I said, has done everything involving the Giants, especially in Arizona. So let's all welcome Charlie Vascellaro. Charlie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everybody.
When you need to see what happens, let me know. Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and help a slideshow here.
Okay. So, no, that's the wrong one. I always do that. Let's go to security. There it is. Charlie, all yours.
Okay, can you see the picture on the screen right now?
Not yet. Usually takes a second or so.
That screen.
Nope.
Still got nothing?
Got nothing.
Okay, let me see where is there something oh, here am I? There we go. Okay, got it. I think this is it.
There you go.
What do you see now? Okay.
We see Horace Stoneham.
I was gonna say, I think everybody knows who that is, right? Okay, so when you tell this story about the Giants coming to spring training in Arizona, you got to start with Horace Stoneham. So way back in 1947, the Giants became one of two teams to permanently move their spring training operations to Arizona, and one being the Giants and the other being the Cleveland Indians at the time, Bill Veeck. So Stoneham, as you guys know, I know I'm talking to a New York Giants society, so I'm assuming you guys know a little bit about Stoneham. Stoneham had lots of connections in Hollywood, lots of friends on the other side of the country, spent a lot of time. He had westward leanings way before 1958, way before the Giants moved to San Francisco. Stoneham was already thinking about the West, and he loved Arizona. He was wooed to Arizona by a group of realtors and businessmen in Arizona who were trying to create a spring training circuit. And one of these guys, let me see if I can get to the next screen here. Next picture. Let me see. How do I'll go back and thought I clicked on the button to give us the next slide. Let's see what's going on. Okay. All right. Are you seeing screen? Oh, it says my screen sharing is paused. Let's see. Okay. Can you see that picture?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know who knows about the buckhorn bass. Are you familiar with the buckhorn bass? So this is out in Mesa, Arizona, East Mesa. The buckhorn bass, this was a gas station originally until the couple who owned the place had what I like to call their Jed Clampett moment. They hit a well, they hit a natural hot spring, and when they turned the place into a spa rather than a gas station. And when they were trying to figure out how to bring Stoneham to Arizona for spring training, somebody thought, let's bring him out to Buckhorn Bass. I bet he'll like this place. So there was a guy named Dwight Patterson, who was a realtor in Mesa, that kind of led the group to the Buckhorn Bass. Stoneham took an immediate liking to the place. And it was one of the main reasons why he decided to move the Giants to spring training in Arizona. You can see here, welcome to the San Francisco Giants. This is post 1958, but he had him out there even earlier than that. This photograph shows what it would have looked like. This was when the highway system was taking hold across America, and roadside stops like this were kind of becoming more commonplace. People would stop at the Buckhorn Bass who were just weary road travelers traveling in either direction. But Stoneham decided to set up camp here with the team, and they had barracks and they lived there and they practiced there, and then they would go to Phoenix Municipal Stadium for the games. Okay, let's see. How do I get to the... For some reason, it's not letting me move through the slides. There we go. Okay, here's Dwight Patterson. You can see him?
Yeah.
So Dwight Patterson was they call him the father of the Cactus League. He was, there's a field in Hohokam Park where the A's play now and the Cubs played before. The field is named after Dwight Patterson. Dwight Patterson was the guy who brought Stoneham to the Buckhorn Bass. He's given credit for kind of getting the whole process moving and getting spring training coming to Arizona. They love him in Mesa. This is jockstrap. It's hanging in the men's room in the lounge at Hohokam Park. Have this thing in front of a urinal where you couldn't escape from it. You kind of go into the men's room and the first thing you see is Dwight Patterson's jockstrap. He's like I said, he has iconic status in Mesa. There's Gaylord Perry sitting in the tub. Perry would have been one of the players that they invited. They used to invite the players to spring training back then. It wasn't a whole roster that got to go to the Buckhorn Bass. It was select few. Perry became very good friends with the couple who owned the home there, that owned the Bass, and he would come back and visit with them all the time. But there you see Perry in the tub. So over in Cleveland, Bill Veeck, one of the players that was on Cleveland Indians in 1947 was Larry Doby, the first black player in the American League. And there's some speculation as to whether or not Bill Veeck brought the Cleveland club to Tucson because of Larry Doby. Veeck also had a vested interest in the area. He owned a cattle ranch. And the idea of whose idea it was first to come to Arizona, Stoneham or Veeck, it's kind of one of those chicken and egg kind of things. So, but Doby was there. He was not there in the spring of 47. He broke into the big leagues in July of 47, shortly after Robinson. But his first spring with the team would have been 1948 at Corbett Field in Tucson. And there's Veeck. Veeck had when Veeck brought his team to Tucson, there's a story he told about having him in Florida before, and it might have been one of the other clubs. I don't even think it was the Indians at the time, but he had a team in Florida that he was sitting in the bleacher section with the black fans, and some cops asked him to move out of that section, and they didn't know who he was. but he was quoted the next day in the paper saying that he would,
Right.
pull his team out of
No,
Florida.
no,
And
that's
this is a picture of Larry Doby out on the outfield wall at the Goodyear Ballpark here in Arizona. All of the Cleveland Hall of Famers are honored out on the outfield concourse. Bob Feller would have been among the early Cleveland players to be on the to have spring training in Arizona in those early days. Big star of the team. Here's a picture from the first game ever played between the Giants and Cleveland in 1947 at Old Phoenix Municipal Stadium. You can see spring training was a rousing success here in town. It's obviously a capacity crowd, and some of the fans are even sitting on the field. I don't know how they got away with that back then, but it looks like they sold more tickets than they had to the game. A couple of years later, in 1951, the Yankees and Giants traded spring training sites just for the 51 season. You might see Del Webb over here in the trench coat at the end of the field, and the slide is in reverse. I'm sorry about that, but you can see it says New York across their jerseys backwards. So somehow this slide's in reverse. This looks like Phil Rizzuto to me down here, and I believe Yogi might be right there in the middle. 51 was a pretty pivotal year for the Yankees. It was Mickey Mantle's rookie season and Joe DiMaggio's last season, and DiMaggio announced his retirement during the spring here in Arizona. A couple of the early Giants in the 50s that were having spring training here in Arizona, the great Monty Irvin and Willie Mays, two crossover players from the Negro Leagues. I love this picture. Monty Irvin literally and figuratively took Willie Mays under his wing. And I think this picture kind of shows that. He was a strong mentoring presence for young Willie when he came in. Here's a picture you can see from Monty Irvin's obit a few years back. And you can see the outfield wall in this picture. That is the outfield wall at Phoenix Municipal Stadium. It's a spring training photo that they used in the obit. I love digging up old photos and recognizing spring training ballparks in the background. Here's a great shot. Also, you can see that outfield advertising on the wall back there. This is Willie Mays signing an autograph for a lucky kid. And this picture really shows you how casual spring training was back in the days. There's a photographer walking down the field with a big camera in his hand here. And this guy is smoking a cigar in the bleachers. You're not allowed to do that anymore. And I don't know who this guy is sitting on a bucket, but it sure looks like a relaxed day out at Phoenix Muni and pretty easy to get Willie Mays' autograph. In 1952, the Chicago Cubs became the third team to hold spring training in Arizona. They played at this old ballpark, Rendezvous Park in Mesa, which was used for industrial teams and semi-pro teams and different kinds of teams. This was the founder, Dwight Patterson, had a vested interest in this place. The players lived in barracks on the grounds of the ballpark. I've spoken with Billy Williams about his time living in the barracks at Rendezvous Park. Sometimes teams would be barnstorming through town. The Atlanta Braves did not hold spring training in Arizona, but on their way to LA one year for opening day against the Dodgers, they took a pit stop at Rendezvous Park. This was a few years later. The park was used by the A's and the Cubs at different times. And this is Dave Duncan behind the plate. And this is a game, early 70s, when the A's were the home team at Rendezvous Park. And Hank Aaron's doing what Hank Aaron does best, hitting a home run. And I love the bat rack on the outside of the dugout. Shows you the kind of rustic nature of the ballpark. In 1954, the fledgling Baltimore Orioles, the former St. Louis Browns, moved out to Yuma, Arizona, of all places, to become the fourth team in the Cactus League. This Yuma Municipal Park, it wasn't even a ballpark. It was originally a horse track, and you can see back here that's the grandstand for the racetrack, and they just kind of carved a diamond in. This picture looks like it may have been taken after the ballpark was being utilized. They were only there for 2 years, 1954 and 1955, and I always thought it was a peculiar selection that the Orioles would choose to go to Yuma, of all places. Made a little bit more sense for the Padres later, but for a team from Baltimore, I wonder sometimes how they landed in Yuma. Here's what it looked like later. The Padres moved in 1969, and they stayed there all the way until 1992, and they really built it up into a full complex. You can see the practice fields around here. There was a golf course out back. You can see the Yuma Water Tower. Desert Hill Sports Center in Yuma, there wasn't a whole lot out there in Yuma besides the territorial prison at this time. But when the Padres came to town, it was enough of a draw for Padres fans to show up. You can see there's a pretty good crowd in the parking lot. I can't quite see in the stands how full they were that day, but it looks like they got a nice crowd for the postcard shot here. Here's a great moment for the Giants in 1955, coming back to Phoenix as the world champs. As you all know, only one team gets to return to spring training as the reigning champions. And it's a great feeling when you get to hang a banner up that says something about it. And you get to remind everybody all through the month of spring training that you are the champions. You might remember the episode of The Honeymooners in 1954. Jackie Gleason and Art Carney, Ralph and Ed, had tickets for a World Series game, but they got locked up in Alice's mother's apartment on the third floor of some cold water flat in the city, and it took them all night to get out. They rappelled down the building using bed sheets. A cop thought they were breaking into the place as they were coming down, and they were explaining the story to him how they had these tickets to the game, and they were so happy that they got out of the building. They hadn't listened to the news, and they didn't realize they had tickets for Game 5 of the series. And of course, the Giants had swept Cleveland the night before. The first team to have spring training at Scottsdale Stadium here in Arizona was the Baltimore Orioles, 1956. Wow. Here's a funny picture of Ryan Duran doing a posed sliding shot. I don't think Ryan Duran spent a whole lot of time running around the bases and sliding, but it is spring training, and so everybody gets to run through the drills. My favorite Oriole from the old days is back here, Gus Triandos, the great catcher. He was probably the biggest star on those early Orioles teams before Brooks Robinson arrived and before the team got really good. Here's a cover of the 1957 Orioles spring training program, the Bird Watcher's Manual. And you see it only costs 50 cents for the program. Scottsdale Stadium, the winter nest of the Baltimore Orioles. This is what Scottsdale Stadium would have looked like back in the 50s and even into the 60s and 70s as well. But the area was undeveloped, nowhere near as developed as we know it now. There's some residential stuff going on, but in this background. And if you look the other way, you'll see some agriculture. I'll turn the slide here around in a second. But Scottsdale was nothing like it is now. It was really kind of a little podunk town back then with a lot of dirt roads and not a whole lot of commerce. And you can see the parking was pretty easy. You could pull right up to the ballpark. These days, parking sure is at a premium in Scottsdale, and nobody gets to park that close to the stadium. You can see here, again, a completely undeveloped Scottsdale on three sides here. This is Osborne Road, which is a big thoroughfare right now, and it's Osborne here in Drinkwater. It's a pretty big corner in the city. But you can see once again, everybody got a nice place to park, and it's a pretty full crowd this day. It looks like the game is actually in progress here. It looks like there's some runners on base and everybody's in the outfield. Funny thing about this picture, it looks like everybody drove the same model car back then. I don't know how you could find your car in the parking lot when everybody's car looks exactly the same. Here's the schedule for the Orioles back then. There was only 4 teams in the league. So they get the Cubs on the 10th, they get the Indians on the 11th, they get the Giants on the 14th. Then on the 19th, they get the Indians. Then on the 21st, they get the Giants. The 22nd, they get the Cubs. And they close out at home with the Cubs and the Indians and the Giants. Those in-between days, they were playing at the other guys' parks. This old cowboy is still standing on the same corner in Scottsdale. There he is. They don't put the schedule in there anymore, but he's in front of the Gilbert Ortega. That's kind of a touristy gift shop and Southwestern art gallery. He's still there. After the Orioles left town, they were only in Scottsdale for a couple of years. the Red Sox showed up, another East Coast team coming all the way to Arizona for spring training. And you can see the splendid splinter over here, Ted Williams. And you can see the manager was Pinky Higgins. And I believe that's Jackie Jensen over on the side. The cops are mounted on their horses, and it's all dirt. And they got a chain link fence to get into the ballpark. When I was a kid in the late 70s and early 80s, it still looked like this when I would go to games at Scottsdale Stadium before the renovation. And sometimes the gate would just be open after the third inning, and you could walk right in, and it was a dirt floor like it is in this picture. There they are again. You recognize Johnny Pesky over here, and again Pinky Higgins and Ted Williams. As you might know, Ted Williams. Oh, here's Ted Williams, and I'm not sure if you recognize the guy in this picture. Some of you do. It's Ty Cobb. So Ty Cobb spent his springs. He had some kind of advisory job, I think, with the Red Sox at some point late in his life. Williams and Cobb, they were two pretty cantankerous SOBs, and this sometimes they would get into some heated exchanges. Here they are watching batting practice at Scottsdale Stadium, and they had a famous argument one spring where they were each trying to pick their top 9 players, and a single player at every position in Major League history. And they argued about it. The argument went back to one of the hotel rooms. It escalated over a bottle of whiskey. And at one point, Ty Cobb told Williams to leave his room and get out and never come back. And he never wanted to talk to him again. And he never did, because he died shortly thereafter. That was supposedly their last conversation. Here's a picture where they're pretending to like each other. You can see them smiling. It's a pose shot. Maybe they liked each other. Who knows? I'm sure they respected each other. But that is a classic photograph taken at Scottsdale Stadium. Ted Williams is still here in Scottsdale. You might know this. He is being held in a liquid nitrogen tank at the Alcor facility. They're waiting to bring him back to life so he can come back and play in another spring training and maybe add to those 521 home runs someday. I visited the Alcor facility and interviewed them for a story I was writing. These are the tanks. Alcor offers a couple of different options. One is head and body together, or you could just save the head. The head's the most important part. They can make a new body for you later, and you'll still have your brain so you remember who you are. I always have an idea that someday I'd like to see him put Ted Williams' head on Barry Bonds' body and see how many more home runs that player could hit. Here is Geronimo Park in Apache Junction. This is the Houston Colt 45s, the fledgling Colt 45s of 1962. Another slapped together wooden ballpark. And you can see, you might be able to recognize who's in that picture. It's Manny Mota sitting on top of the ladder. Here's those crazy old Colt 45s uniforms they had with the smoking gun and the 45s hat. They had to give up they never had the naming rights to the Colt 45s. That belonged to the gun company, and they lost the naming rights to the team. And with the space age coming in and the space program in Houston, they then became the Astros. But this is back when they were the 45s. This team here, the 1962 45s, was one of the youngest teams to ever take the field. The Colt 45s took a completely different track than the Mets did in 62, whereas the Mets were going after guys like Roger Craig and Don Zimmer and Gil Hodges, old Dodgers that the fans would recognize. The Colt 45s were scooping up pretty good young players like Rusty Staub and Jimmy Wynn and Joe Morgan, and my favorite player, Jerry Grody, the catcher. There they are out on the field at Apache Junction. This is the Superstition Mountain Range off in the background. And there's Harry Kraft again, giving a little pep talk or lecture to the guys out on the field. My favorite, Jerry Grody. He was just finding his way back then. He was a young catcher, a good catcher, not a great hitter, but I still think, in my opinion, he's one of the best defensive catchers to ever play the game, and he's my favorite Mets catcher of all time. If you went out to a game in Apache Junction, you might have seen young Jimmy Wynn and Willie Mays facing off against each other. Some rising stars. Jimmy Wynn was a rising star. Willie Mays was already an established star. They lived in this is a hotel called the Superstition Hotel, and it's up against the Superstition mountain range. And the players actually lived there during the spring. It stayed a hotel for a while. Later, it became a kind of a flea market, and it's still out there. They've converted into shopping booths, but this is what it would have looked like back then. I interviewed Jimmy Wynn, and I asked him, what did you do out there in Apache Junction when you had a day off or something? And he said, we used to go out there and look for the lost Dutchman's gold mine. Here's what it looks like today. And I say today, I took this picture in 1997 when I was kind of working on this presentation and this story for the first time. I was creating a story called The Lost Ballparks of the Cactus League for the Diamondbacks magazine. And it was about the ballparks that didn't exist anymore, the precursors to the ones that we had then, and the idea that we were becoming a major league city. So I was out there kind of looking for the sites, looking for the places where ballparks used to be. This is where, on these grounds, is where Apache Junction would have been. There's a Moose Lodge. I think it's still out there. It was in 1997, but this corner is where the ballpark was located. You can see in this picture a svelte, Rusty Staub in the pre-La Grande Orange days when he was still a young man. And he's standing on the field with Harry Kraft, and the mountains are in the background, and this horrible infield that barely looks like you could play on it. But, you know, it's desert caliche. It's a hard soil. I wonder how many bad hops there were on that field back then. Look at this picture and this picture back and forth. You kind of get a sense for where the ballpark was. This picture is a little closer to the mountain range, but it's almost in the same vicinity. That fence kind of runs the same angle as the first base line does in this picture. So I knew I was getting close. There was a trailer park there, but I knew I was getting close to the site of the ballpark. I started to come up with the term ballparkeology when I went out there. That's not home plate. It's just a little piece of styrofoam that looks like home plate, and I found it in the tumbleweeds. I went back to the flea market, and I was hoping to find a program or a postcard or something about the Colt 45s, but all I could find was this Colt 45 malt liquor tray. Here we are back in Scottsdale, and you might recognize Ernie Banks. And this is the Cubs became the third team to have spring training in Scottsdale after the Red Sox left. First we had the Orioles, then we had the Red Sox, then we had the Cubs. Here's Ernie Banks being Ernie Banks, signing balls for fans. This guy in this picture saw this photograph published in a magazine article I wrote once, and he never knew he was in that picture. He remembered getting Ernie Banks' autograph, and when he saw the photograph, he tracked me down. He said, "You think I could get a copy of this picture?" And I was able to make a print for him. And then he said, "You think we could get Ernie to sign it?" And Dusty Baker was managing the Cubs at the time, and we sent a letter to Dusty with the picture in the envelope and said, "Could you get Ernie Banks to sign this for us?" And they all did. They're two really nice guys. Dusty Baker and Ernie Banks made it happen, and he ended up getting this photograph handed back to him after all those years, autographed. Here's another kid who met Ernie Banks once, but his dad was so excited, he cut his head off in the picture. This kid, it's the best day of this little kid's life. And his dad's getting a shot of Ernie Banks. But we're just going to have to believe him. I think it looks like Ernie Banks' hands there. I believe him. Here's Hohokam Park. So Hohokam Park is where the Cubs played in the 70s and then later the A's, and it's gone through a couple of different incarnations. It's been relocated to across the street, but when I was a little teenager here in Arizona, my family moved from New York. That was the first spring training ballpark I had ever laid eyes on, and I was immediately fascinated and taken by it. I didn't realize, being a kid from New York, that there was even spring training in Arizona. I just assumed it was all in Florida. And so I saw this ballpark out the school bus window one day, and immediately when the bus stopped, my junior high school was only a few blocks away. I got off the bus and went over to Hohokam Ballpark, and the rest is hooky playing history. I've been doing it for the rest of my life ever since. And there's our friend Dusty Baker. That's me, a little skinny little New York teenager with an LA Dodgers hat and my high school buddy Bob. And it's a blurry picture, but it might as well have looked just like that to us that day because we were pretty excited. Look at the hand-operated scoreboard. The game is still in progress, which is kind of funny. There's a chain link fence out here. And Dusty Baker was running his wind sprints out in the outfield, back and forth, and we were yelling at him. And he finally said, what do you kids want? And we said, we just want a picture. And we jumped over the fence, which was about belt high, and we're standing in the left field corner, posing for a picture with Dusty while the game was still in progress. It just goes to show you how much has changed in the world of spring training games and how close you can get to players now. You can never dream of having a moment like this again. I just saw Dusty Baker eating breakfast 2 days ago at a restaurant in Scottsdale. Here, me and Bob recreated the moment. You can see this first picture was taken in 1979, and we went back to another game a couple of years ago and took another picture without Dusty. The great Ron Luciano. There's a book coming out about him by my friend Jim Leake. But as a kid, you don't really become a fan of too many umpires. But Luciano was one that he was so entertaining and fun that you just gravitated to him almost like a player. And this was also at Hohokam Park, and he's hanging around out after the game. The players would walk out these clubhouse doors right into the fans back then too, and the umpires. And I recognized Luciano, and he's actually autographing a ball for me in that picture, if you can see the pen in his hand. And again, I'm about 14 or 15 years old back then. Here's Willie Hernandez, the great relief pitcher, the 1985 MVP and young winner for the American League Detroit Tigers, the world champ Tigers. This would have been about 1979 or 80 when he was still on the Cubs. We had pictures developed at the 1 hour photo mat the day after we went to the game, and we'd stand in front of the photo mat and wait for the pictures to be developed so we could bring them back to the game and have them signed right afterwards. This is my little brother and a couple of my friends. And here's, before you saw us on the field with Dusty, now you see Willie Hernandez in the stands with us. This is the bullpen right here, but he had already come out of the game and went and got cleaned up and decided to sit with the fans instead of the players. You just never see anything like that anymore. Here's Camelback Mountain off in the distance. We're back at Scottsdale Stadium again. By this time, I believe it had become the home of the Oakland A's after the Cubs. So it went Orioles, Red Sox, Cubs, A's. Eventually, it'll be the Giants. But in the 70s and early 80s, it was the A's. I used to see Billy Martin out there and some of those guys. Here's a picture now. You can see Scottsdale Stadium, and there's Roger Craig, the home baby, and Commissioner Fay Vincent. This was 1992, and there was some concern. I'm sorry, 1991. There was some concern at the time that teams were going to leave the Cactus League. There was a commission formed to try and save spring training baseball in Arizona. The governor, Rose Mofford, was instrumental in bringing revenue devices, creating taxes on hotel rooms and rental cars. But they had a whole commission, and Fay Vincent was in town really to discuss the future of the Cactus League and how it was going to pan out. And I was in the seats just behind him. I took this picture with my own camera. I was a student at ASU. I was writing a paper about that exact topic at the time. And I went over and talked to Fay Vincent, and I asked him, can I get some quotes for you for my story I'm working on at ASU? And he was perfectly cool about it. He told me he'd meet me outside the ballpark afterwards. There were tunnels where you could walk out. And he told me, look for me. He used a cane to get around, and he also used a golf cart to get around. But I was waiting for him out there. And he granted me an impromptu interview in front of all the fans, which was a thrilling experience for a college kid still working his way through journalism school. Stay as long as possible. And we hung around after the game was over. That's my friend Carl in the front seat, my friend Billy in the back. And this car was owned by somebody we do not know. It's just a convertible, but it was always out there, the Ballpark Express. And I said, get in there and we'll take a picture. And this is another one pictures that I ended up publishing in stories, and the guy who owned the car recognized it. And one day I met him. He ended up being a bartender from Lefty O'Doul's in San Francisco, who would make these strips every year. That was his car. And this was the last day. They literally came and knocked this ballpark down with a wrecking ball the next day. We were wandering all around the ballpark looking for souvenirs, and I was standing up on top of a bleacher section, and I saw a baseball lodged in this tree. It's right there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right in there. And I climbed up on top of the bleachers and over the barbed wire and rescued this ball that had been hit out of the batting cage into this tree however many years ago, and then just was growing and being lifted to the heavens until I rescued it from its place. I'm standing on top of porta-johns and wearing 1990s style pants. Good thing I didn't rip the ball. Then we started ripping the whole place apart. We got our souvenirs, our pieces of Scottsdale Stadium to take with us. Those are actual pieces of the ballpark. It's funny, these days when the game ends, they just usher you out as quickly as possible. Back then, all the employees were gone and they just let us hang around. I even grabbed one of these chairs as a souvenir, the folded chairs, in that very familiar aqua blue or teal color, whatever you want to call it. And whenever I see a baseball card with those in the background, I can always tell the picture was taken at Scottsdale Stadium. That was back in the days when you can carry your own beer into the ballpark too. There's a cooler with all sorts of cans of beer and ice there, like we used to do in the good old days. Here's the press box. pretty rustic press box at Scottsdale Stadium. One row, no computer hookups. You know, guys would file their story on the phone or however you did it back then. It was pretty funny. We were wandering around in the press box again another day after the game and everybody was gone. And I picked up the phone and it was live still on. And back then you used to get an itemized phone bill and long distance phone calls were expensive. So we figured we should make a good one. And we called my buddy Carl's mom in Buffalo and talked to her for a little while. I always wonder who saw that on the bill and said, who's calling Buffalo at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? This is the ballpark in Sun City where the Brewers played. I would imagine Steve is familiar with this place and maybe some other guys too. The great Roger Angel, once writing about Sun City Stadium, said it was looked like a hollowed out moon crater completely surrounded by golf carts. And you can see the golf carts in this picture. More great parking at the ballpark. Of course, you might get hit with a foul ball, but how nice was that? They had a very captive audience out there in Sun City, the Brewers, and they were beloved by their fans. It was what a treat to have a team playing right there in Sun City. The great Hank Aaron went to the retirement community of Sun City for his retirement. The last 2 years with the Milwaukee Brewers, it was a homecoming of sorts for Aaron, who broke in with the Milwaukee Braves and spent the lion's share of his career at Atlanta Braves, but came back to Milwaukee to be a DH for the final 2 seasons of his career. By this time, he was already the home run king. So he's just all relaxed and happy, not feeling that pressure that he felt during the chase. It was a shame that Aaron had to go through what he had to go through when he was breaking Hank Aaron's when he was breaking Babe Ruth's record. But by this time, it was all behind him. Here's a couple of young Brewers on the rise now. They're looking at the new ballpark. So when the Brewers left Sun City, they moved to a ballpark in Chandler, Compadre Stadium, which we all really love that ballpark too. It's not there anymore either, and there is a residential community built on that site. But back then, they were just getting ready to move in here, and that is Paul Molitor and young Robin Yount, who still looks like that, and Ben Ogilvy. 3 pretty great Brewers right there, kind of checking out their new digs. Here's a confusing picture. This is out in Casa Grande, the ruins of Casa Grande. And so Casa Grande was also a spring training locale for the Giants. They didn't necessarily play official exhibition games there, but they did play some inter-squad games there, an occasional exhibition game. But Casa Grande was mostly known for this civilization. It's about halfway between and Tucson, a little bit closer. This would have been a reason why you would go to Casa Grande. But then Horace Stoneham, once again, created the Francisco Grande training complex. And this was a magnificent place. You have this big main field over here. You got 4 practice fields and a clover over here. There was barracks for the players to live in and a luxury resort hotel on the grounds. And again, look at all the cars in the parking lot. Something big was going on this day. There's a game on the field and the crowd looks pretty full. I don't know if this was a fawn exhibition game or just a Giants versus Giants game, but obviously a lot of people came out to see it. Here's a postcard. This used to be the bill of the hat. On top of the building, there was a Giants cap up here. And that was the bill of the cap. You can see the swimming pool is shaped like a baseball bat. And now it's a resort golf club, but it's also a training headquarters for soccer teams, for world soccer teams. They go out to Casa Grande and use those grounds. There's no real remnants anymore of the baseball fields that were there. I did go out there, and I'm going to move on to some pictures to show you what it looked like in 1997. Here it is, the Francisco Grande Resort. 2 celebrities owned suites up on top. John Wayne, he owned about most of this up here. And then on the other side was Pat Boone. I don't know what Pat Boone's interest was in Casa Grande. John Wayne was a cattle rancher, and he owned one of the biggest cattle ranches in this side of the country, the Rooster Cogburn Cattle Ranch, and it's still there. And you can still smell it sometimes when the wind is just right. Even standing there at Casa Grande, at Francisco Grande, and these palm trees remind me of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, because you will remember it was under the big
camera. Make Zoom meeting.
Here's the swimming pool. You can see from the hotel. This is in the backyard of the hotel. So you got the baseball bat pool, and the jacuzzi is the ball, and there's the fields off in the background. Candlestick Drive. I think that's still the name of the street out there. And here I am taking a picture from the top of the hotel back at the Cloverleaf of practice field. There's the equipment manager's room, and it was a crow's nest. It was an observation deck. Coaches and the scouts and anybody interested in seeing what was going on these 4 fields would gather up there and even conduct the proceedings from up there, orchestrate what was going on the fields. Another view of the pool. You can pick out one of the, at this point, 1987, when I picture, no one had used these fields since 84. The Angels used it for a short while after the Giants, but at this point, it had just been deserted. Here is the wall of the main field, that big field that I showed the picture of before. Those are remnants of the outfield wall. I actually found a dimension sign out there. I think it said 365 on it, and I rescued a dimension sign from there. Here you can see some of what it would have been then, the tower we were looking for. Here's some guys wearing SEALs uniforms, some minor united to the Major League camp. And here it is again. Now I'm approaching this tower in 1997. I'm going to walk on in, and there was a door here. And when I got to the door, I tried to open. The doorknob turned, but the door stuck shut. And my friend who was with me told me, "You got to bang your shoulder in it. You got to pop that door open." Pop the door open, and all these rats came running out. Then also, when I could finally see what was inside, I had hit pay to home plate from Casa Grande. That's like finding the Holy Grail in baseball archaeology. Look at the Francisco Grande sign. That was in there too. So these are some fantastic items that I was able to rescue from this storage shed. They've been sitting in there just aging for years. I got the plate and the sign. I got the pitcher's rubber and the home plate. When I opened the door, there were 2 rubbers and 2 home plates in there. And I grabbed one of each, and I left one of each behind, because I thought, well, if anybody else makes this pilgrimage, we'll let there be something for them to find. I came back 1 year later and they were still there, so I grabbed those ones too. There it is, the pitching rubber that, who knows, Juan Marichal probably had his feet on that and that rubber as well. And then there's a museum, of course. So a lot of these items, these old ballpark relics that I gathered up, all these, we've turned into museums. This was in Tempe, 50th anniversary of Cactus League. Here's a holes on Scottsdale Stadium. A newspaper that day is Will Clark signing autographs, and they were telling us it's the end for Scottsdale Stadium, and the knot never going to get together anymore. And I thought to myself, I saw that story. Well, I got to poke some knots in ears. And funny thing, I mean, things out after the last game. Nobody ever looked through the whole game. It was late, but I was able to give a couple of knots. Those are my favorite clubs. This earthquake relief game. You might recall the Earthquake World Series of 1989. Well, they had a fundraiser game back on March 1st, which would have been one of the first games of training. Not the for that year. At the price, $8. Not bad. If you do know already how this are at Scottsdale Stadium. This ticket was for the last game at Old Scottsdale Stadium, which was April 3rd, 1991. But it really wasn't for that game. Just had an old ticket stub and I whited out whatever was written on it before and put in a typewriter and just typed the game over it. There was no barcodes or anything back then. I just showed it to the usher. He said, looks good enough to me. Last game at Old Scottsdale Stadium. Here's a chair coming out of Yuma for the chair collection. Here are all the chairs of the Cactus League that I gathered up over the years to put in museum exhibits for historical preservation. Here's one of our exhibits at the Scottsdale Library a couple of years ago, and this is a Rhodes Scholar group through the exhibit. This is where all this stuff, and I think this is the last slide in this part of the show. Should I go back to where we can look at each other?
Yes.
Okay, I think I see everybody. I'm
Beautiful
trying to.
slideshow. Beautiful.
Well, thank you very much. Does anybody want to ask questions about this before I start about something else?
Charlie, I got to tell you, the connection is bad. I don't know what's going on.
The connection's bad?
Yeah, we're hearing, unless it's me, losing a lot of your sentences.
I'm not,
Oh,
Gary.
no.
No, it's breaking up, Gary. You're right. It is breaking up.
Oh,
So I think you should maybe try not to move. So I don't know. Sometimes you go on for a few minutes and it's totally fine.
Yeah, he breaks up on my end too.
Why don't you?
Nice shirt.
Why don't we save the questions for the end? Why don't you talk about the Rhodes Scholar?
Okay,
I think that'd be.
I'm in a hotel room in Tucson. I don't know if I should move before a different part of the room and see if it works better.
I don't know how.
Let me do that.
I don't know.
The early part of the
I'm gonna-
presentation was perfect.
Yeah.
The latter part that it started to
And then
break.
it started. Let's see if this is better here. I'm moving closer to where the
That sounds
router
good.
would be.
I hear it perfectly.
Yeah, that sounds good now.
Yeah, I'm in a better spot, I think now.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay,
Much
well, that's
better.
better.
Yes, it is.
I'm
You're
moving
much clearer.
closer to the office. I'm in a like a little inn, and the office is right here. Okay, here I'll show you some stuff from the Rhodes Scholar program.
Okay, let me give you back the screen.
Okay,
All yours.
all me now. Okay. Should be popping up here in a second. Everybody see that?
No.
Yes. So the Rhodes Scholar program
don't
is
see it?
fantastic.
Oh, not yet.
Charlie, there's nothing here.
You don't see it yet?
No.
Okay. Let's see if I have to hit share screen again. Let's see. Where did it go? Let's see. All right. If I go to this, I'm just seeing one person right now. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Am I still in here? Okay, I see everybody. Oh, there it is. I gotta hit the share screen again. Okay. Now,
Not yet.
not yet. Let's see what happens if I hit this picture. Are you seeing something now?
There you go.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, very good.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is one of my most recent Rhodes Scholar groups. We were together for 2 different weeks out here. If you're familiar with the Rhodes Scholar program, it's a continuing education program for seniors. And you can take Rhodes Scholar trips on any subject you like. You could go around the world. You could go to be a bird watcher. You could go look at museums in Italy. You could do whatever you want. But this is a baseball group, and I've been running these programs for about 20 years now. And this is our meeting room where we get together. We have an orientation session in the beginning and discuss what we're going to do. And then we gather in this room almost every day. But we also go to a game every day. We take all our meals together. It's an all-inclusive program. Let me see if I can make sure that we're going to the next slide here. And there, can you see the schedule?
Yeah.
So here is a week of Rhodes Scholar programs. We show up on a Sunday, Sunday the 3rd. I did one that started on Sunday the 10th. We have our registration. We have our dinner. We make presentations. I made the first presentation that day, but you will see some other names that you know on here, like Robert Garrett and Marty Lurie, people who have presented here in this group before. Regulars on my circuit with the Rhodes Scholar Group, Bill Staples, who is an expert on Japanese and Negro Leagues baseball. You'll see we go to a game just about every single day, except for the first one. We do 4 games straight. Here's a day game in Salt River Fields, a day game at Scottsdale Stadium, a day game at Sloan Park, and a night game at Scottsdale Stadium. That was the first week. We also made it out to Glendale and Surprise for games. But as you can see, the days are packed. The activities are packed. It starts early and it ends late, and we just keep going all 3 days. I mean, all 5 days straight. This Marty Lurie presentation was fantastic. I'll show you a little bit more what it looks like. That would be me making a presentation in the beginning. Here's our group out at Salt River Fields. We always have great seats in the shade pretty much every day. At night, it doesn't matter, but it's nice to be in the shade some of these days in Arizona. 9 innings in the sun is tough. Here's Bill Staples. He gave a fantastic talk on the Japanese-American baseball legacy, what he calls building bridges to the Pacific. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Staples, but there's not too many people in the world who know as much about Japanese professional baseball and Japanese baseball relations between the U.S. and Japan. He's instrumental in getting a lot of things done. He's going to get some of the artifacts from the Japanese baseball leagues into Cooperstown next year as well. There's going to be some permanent recognition, mostly because of him. Robert Garrett, I'm sure you're familiar with Robert. He's written books about both Charles and Horace Stoneham. And one of the nice things about the Rhodes Scholar program, when these guys come in to talk to the group, they always bring a stack of their books, which you can buy and get signed by the author right after their presentations. Robert's been a veteran. Me and Robert get together and do this every year. We also participate in the 9 conference together in Tempe, which is where I first heard him talk and asked him if he would join our program. Here's our seats at Scottsdale Stadium. Again, nice seats in the shade. That's section 305. They are bleacher seats at Scottsdale. Scottsdale's one of the older ballparks, but we usually get really great seats for these games, and I like that vantage point to watch a game from at Scottsdale. Bobby Freeman is the Diamondbacks organist, the ballpark organist, or one of the last of a dying breed. And there he is. He sets up in our conference room, and he's a consummate entertainer. It's not just music. He's really kind of does a comic show as well while he's in there. We visited the Cactus League Hall of Fame that's housed at the Mesa Historical Museum. I used to be very involved in this process of selecting the Hall of Famers and writing the text for their plaques. This class I'm particularly proud of. It was the 2017 class, and it was Ernie Banks, Monty Irvin, Willie Mays, and Larry Doby, the pioneering Black players of the Cactus League, the first Black 4 Hall of Famers to ever play spring training baseball in Arizona. It was a very dramatic day that day. It was a very emotional day. Willie Mays gave a fantastic 13-minute speech. He was the only guy alive of the group when we inducted those 4. Here's a picture from Sloan Park. The Cubs, it's the biggest of all the Cactus League ballparks, and they draw between 14 and 15,000 games a day out there. This was after the game was winding down with our Road Scholar group, and we're walking out to the bus. But that's what it looks like at Sloan Park. Here's a great one. This is Marty Lurie's presentation in the press box at Scottsdale Stadium. I love that he was able to do something like this for us. You know, we took our group from the Road Scholar from the hotel. We stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn, which is about 3 blocks down the road. And we just walked over. I drove some of them over. And we jumped up into the press box with Marty Lurie, and he gave his talk from the press box, which is, you know, you get to watch the grounds crew out the windows, getting the field ready for the game while Marty's talking. I would think this is among the highlights of our program. If you've ever heard Marty, you know how entertaining he can be. Then he passes his World Series rings around and lets people put them on their hands. That's my finger with a 2010 World Series ring on it. And John Shea, I don't know if John Shea has spoken in this forum before. He probably has, yeah. So he's talking about his book 24, the Willie Mays book, and we had our meeting outside that day in front of the Scottsdale Historical Society, where we have our History of Scottsdale Stadium museum exhibit set up. So again, that was like a 1-2 punch. We got to go in and look at the museum exhibit and then have John Shea come out and talk to us. It was the first year for him doing the program, and he really loved it, and I can't wait to bring him back every year. And again, he was able to sell some books. We did this is kind of a timely shot. You know who's been in the news lately? That's Ohtani at a Camelback Ranch in Glendale. And we saw a great Giants-Dodgers game on March 12th. And Ohtani was hitting the ball all over the place that day. He had two singles to right and left center and an opposite field home run in that game. And that was taken from our seats where we were sitting. Here, talking to John Shea. That's a little out of sequence, but there we are we had a little Q&A. This picture is also taken, I want to say, at Scottsdale Stadium, it looks like. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is Surprise. This is the Royals. And that is the great Salvador Perez at the plate. What a treat to see him still doing his thing. And the more I see Salvador Perez go out on the field, the more I think maybe he's a Hall of Famer. Him and Yadi Molina, I think, are the catchers of our era. And yeah, what a treat. We go out for great meals together. This one's at Grimaldi's Pizza in Scottsdale. We could walk to the hotel from here. Every night we go somewhere good for dinner. And there's a couple of nights we eat at the hotel, but this was a fun kind of pizza buffet party that we had. This is a restaurant called Tommy V's in Old Town Scottsdale. Also, usually it's our farewell dinner before we part and say goodbye to each other as a group, but it's a great way to end the program. We got rained out on the Dodgers and Giants night game this year. I was so mad, and I think it was Bob Melvin's fault, because the umpires, they called that game so quickly. We had just gotten into the ballpark. They got 2 innings in. There was this deluge. It lasted about 15 minutes. By the time they kicked us all out, it had already stopped raining, and I couldn't believe. And I asked John Shea, I said, who called that game? And he says, well, the umpires talked to the managers. And I said, but who's got the last say? Who says we're going to call it? He told me it was Melvin. Didn't want his rookie pitcher, Harrison, going out there that day. and he just decided to bag it. But I didn't think that was very nice with all of us people there. Here's some of our friends. These are repeat clientele in the Rhodes Scholar program. That's Diane and Claudia and Shirley. We get together every year. And I can't tell you how much I look forward for that calendar to roll around again so that we can do this all over again every year. And here's a couple of them posing for a picture. I think this picture just kind of captures the mood of how the program feels for some reason. Two of my participants. And I think that's the last little piece of that. I do have some pictures of our exhibit at on the history of Scottsdale Stadium. Just a few if you want to blast through those too.
Sounds good. By the way, Charlie, much better sound.
Okay, yeah, I moved outside in front of the room. I should have figured.
Why don't you show those
before when I was out here?
Why don't you show those pictures quick, and then you'll have questions, okay?
Okay. I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to the other ones now, which are they're over here. Hold on one second. Okay, they are in here. Okay. All right. Are we in screen sharing mode now too?
No.
We're not yet. Okay, let me go back and make sure I am. Okay. Right.
There you go.
Now we are, right? Okay. So this is an exhibit I placed in the Scottsdale Historical Museum with my partner, Mike Phillips. We have an organization called the Arizona Baseball Legacy and Experience, and we've been putting things like this in libraries and museums for about the past decade. You can see what's covered here. History of Scottsdale Stadium, the 5 teams that have occupied it, the Orioles, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the A's, and the Giants. And there's artifacts, balls, the knot holes are in there, pictures of guys at the local bars, the Pink Pony and the Coach House and all that. So it really covers the whole social history of it as well. Okay. There's the Orioles and the Red Sox, the first 2 teams to move into the ballpark in the 50s. Kind of a cool shot of the display case there. There's only a few in here. There's a autographed Brooks Robinson jersey. Bill Staples participated in a fantasy camp and was able to get Brooks to sign a bobblehead, a ball, and a shirt for him. Brooks was there in the old days. Here's the Red Sox jersey. That's a replica jersey, but there's some pictures of the Red Sox drinking at a bar called the Coach House in Scottsdale, which, because of the baseball players, became the first integrated bar in Scottsdale. Here's the Cubs, Ron Santo. There's some autographed Cubs stuff in there. I can't remember. I think that's a Fergie Jenkins ball in a Harry Carey program. So we're just kind of going through the years with the teams. Bunch of Ricky Henderson memorabilia in here, a Ricky Henderson jersey, some autographed Ricky Henderson cards, and a hat from the A's. And then Giant stuff that goes practically up to the present tense. The 3 World Series teams are covered pretty well. There's a Will Clark bat and a ball and card. Here's some more of the Giants stuff and the A's. There's that photograph that you saw in the previous slideshow. Steve knows the story of this bobblehead. I'll tell that to other people again someday. I was on the phone with Steve when I discovered that bobblehead.
I remember.
Here's a book of matches from Francisco Grande, an autographed Kevin Mitchell card. Here's the Preservation Society pin. You guys are represented in our exhibit. And there's that picture from the Coach House bar. Felix Mantilla and Lenny Green probably would not have been allowed in that bar if they weren't ball players. But, you know, you'll take your progress where you can get it. And baseball did help accelerate the process of integration in cities like Scottsdale back then. That's Billy Martin dancing at the Pink Pony with the owner, Charlie Bradley's wife, Gwen, and a mariachi band playing in the background. So the Pink Pony, you may have heard of the Pink Pony. It's a pretty famous Scottsdale restaurant that has not been in existence now for quite some time, but it used to be the place. Someday we want to put a baseball museum in the Pink Pony. Steve has heard me talk about this. I've talked with other people in the group about this. The building is just sitting there.
Shame.
There's the original owner, Charlie Briley, sitting at the Pink Pony with Harry
Harry
Carey.
Carey.
It was that kind of place. There's Bobby Bonds and Willie McCovey, again, in the Pink Pony. Everybody used to go there. Here's some paraphernalia, the swizzle stick and the card and the matches and the pen and the stationery. And more pictures of that display case. Oh, Eddie Logan, you know Eddie Logan, right? The son of Ed Logan, he gave us some fantastic memorabilia. His Bat Boys jersey from 1957 and his hat that he wore. I don't know if they're visible in that picture, but he gave us some fantastic items as well. This ball signed by Carl Hubble. I got Carl Hubble to
Wow.
sign, and here's some Cactus League pins. Yeah. And McCuffey's on the same ball, and all the 87 Giants. And there's the Eddie Logan stuff. This is Eddie Logan's 1957 Bat Boy jersey from the end of the Polo Grounds. And here's his hat and a photograph of him wearing that hat and that jersey. So these are the kind of items we've been able to gather and put into these exhibits. We're pretty pleased with what we've been able to come up with. And for as many things as you see here on display, we have just as much in cold storage. There's a Buster Posey bat, a picture of the old Pink Pony back in the day. There was these caricature artists that used to hang around in there and draw pictures of the guys who came in, Dizzy Dean and Ted Williams. There's a whole stack of those. You can hear the train going by. You're in Tucson. Here's some of our items that we have in relative to the Giants. And there's the actual Pink Pony that used to hang on the outside of the bar. It's made of metal. It's still there in our exhibit. And there we are with John Shea. I think that is, we've gone around the loop already. Yeah. Okay. Done with that.
Charlie, I gotta tell you, once we were able to hear you much better, so much more enjoyable. Great job.
Thank you so much.
I loved all the pictures and stuff. I got a couple of questions for you. I'm gonna take the screen back, and then you will take questions. How does, we have a lot of people who live in Arizona and others who make the trek to Arizona for spring. How would they know when this is going to be next year, the Rhodes Scholar? And roughly, what is the cost?
So this year, and I hope it's the same next year, it was $2,600, and that gets you 5 days of everything. Your hotel stay, your meals, your ball game tickets, all the guest speakers, and any of the peripheral activities that we participate in, visits to museums. It's all covered. It's a one-shot deal. And all you got to do is get yourself to Scottsdale. There is a website where you can register on the Rhodes Scholar website. I can share that link with you later if you want to pass it to people. People can already register for next year's programs. We've in the past had 3 weeks, although this year was 2. Ever since 2020, when things died down, it took a little while to rebound and get back up. We used to do 3 Cubs programs and 3 Giants programs, but we're down to just 2 Giants programs. It's still very well attended, about 35 people in each program. And I, as far as I'm concerned, it's the 2 most fun weeks I have all year.
That's great. All right, let's go to gonna go Bill, Harvey, Howard, and Steve, and then the other Bill. Bill Klink, you're first.
Thank you very much, Gary. And boy, Charlie, you are the king of chutzpah. I mean, I know guys that take stuff out of parks. I did. I got 4 seats out of Connie Mack Stadium, and I thought I had chutzpah. You got chutzpah, man. You've been there and you looked at it. What you did down at Casa Grande is, that's one for the record books, man. Knocking indoors, I'll tell you, that's...
Yeah, I'm glad I got there first. I'm glad I got there first.
I did have a question about not just parks, but a city that you overlooked. Our neighbor to the south, the old Pueblo, and 2 parks there that are no longer used. Maybe you have your comments on them. I have great memories of them. The first game I ever jumped a wall and went in for free was at High Corbett Field in 1970.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I didn't get arrested. It's not on my record. I got no record, but
I did
you
the same
comment
thing
about
and
that
landed in the
also,
batting
TV?
cage.
Pardon me?
Say that? I'm sorry.
You have part of the batting cage?
About Tucson?
Yeah.
I jumped over the wall and I found myself in the batting cage. I didn't know where I was going when I went over. I got out quickly, but
In that setting though, where the park, Corbett Field is a wonderful setting.
I'm talking to you from Tucson right now. I'm very close. I'm
Oh,
not far away at all. And I did mention it briefly only with regard to Larry Doby before, because I'm heartbroken that they don't have spring training baseball down here anymore, but they wanted to consolidate the teams in one metropolitan area. It made a lot more sense for everybody to do what they did. I do like the Salt River Fields where the Diamondbacks moved, but I loved going to games at High Corbett, and I even loved Tucson Electric Park too. And the whole thing about making that road trip to come down. But it's funny, it's fading in our memory, those days. It's been a while now.
What do they do with them now?
They High Corbett Field is U of A's home field, the
Okay.
college. Yeah. So they still play their games there. And Tucson Electric Park gets used for all different kinds of tournaments, but also concerts and different events. There's a Mexican League tournament that happens there at some point. Yeah, I'll go by and drive by. Other things in Tucson that are on my historic register. There's a town here, a neighborhood called it's the old African American neighborhood where Larry Doby and Satchel Paige used to live. I'm gonna go by that house and take a picture again. I've been there before. It's called Dunbar, the Dunbar neighborhood. It's within a 5-block walk of where I'm sitting right now. So there is still some history down here. I went down to Tubac today, you know the town of Tubac?
Yeah, I know Tubac well, yeah.
And I found an old baseball field down there that the restaurant owner, this guy Herb Wisdom, built a field, and it's got some history. I took some pictures. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you about Sun City. I live in Sun City, and the ballpark there. Do you know what the current use of that ballpark is?
I don't even know if it's still there. Does Steve know?
No, the ballpark isn't there, but it's they left it carved out as you described it, and there is a senior living project in there. And I don't know how many of those people know they're sitting on home plate or second base or whatever.
Chandler's the same way. Compadre Stadium, I was running around a couple of years ago doing some driving, and I felt like I was on someplace familiar. And then I stopped and got out, and I asked somebody in the neighborhood, I said, wait a second, did the ballpark used to be right here? And he said, yeah.
It's actually that ballpark in Sun City. Fans used to sit in their on their back walls of their homes that overlooked it, and they got to watch the game for free. It wasn't the night game. It was the wall game. They would just sit on their walls and watch the games for free there. The final games that were played there, though, were by you remember the old Sun City Suns, the senior league team.
Yes, I do. Yes, the men's senior baseball league. Yes.
Yeah, they were the last ones there. I did want to show you. I don't know if you remember your first game ever at Scottsdale Stadium. That's mine. That's March of 1970, and that's Ed Broder and I at the old stadium. I'm dressed casually that day. Duke Sims, who I had seen at a couple of other games down in Tucson, saw me and he said, "Hey, kid, the ball boy isn't here today. Would you like to be the ball boy?" You know, I didn't ask how much I got paid. I just said, or anything. I said, yeah, I'll be the ball boy.
Of course.
You don't see it. I had shorts on and sandals. Yeah, I looked like a hippie kid, and I was the ball boy. And then afterwards, Duke Sims says, "Well, kid, you did good. We're going to give you something as a gift." They gave me a 1970 Cleveland Indians autographed ball. Talk about a word. No. I mean, there's nobody on the team. There is nobody. I tried to sell that ball later. Nobody would buy it. But Duke was a nice guy, and you know, he gave me my opportunity of a lifetime. Man, I've been on the field as a ball boy. That game, Broder laughed at me. I know that, but
Thank you, Phil.
I appreciate what you've done, Charlie. Not only putting things together, but your ability to thieve is, you know, that's really good. and not
Thanks.
get caught. I assume you haven't been caught. We don't have, there's no wanted posters out for you, Charlie? No, we're good. Thank you.
Harvey Weinberg, you're up.
Charlie, that was a great presentation. I want to direct your attention to, I think, a time maybe when you weren't even born, but it was 1954 when the Giants swept Cleveland. I grew up in the Bronx, where I was getting a lot of guff from the Yankees fans who had won the World Series the preceding 5 years in a row, and Cleveland broke that string. So I was getting a lot of stuff from the Yankee fans. I was the only Giants fan on the Bronx, on the block. I grew up 5 miles from Yankee Stadium, and the Giants swept Cleveland, and it made my childhood. It really did. I mean, I walked around the
Yeah.
block. These Yankees fans stayed the hell away from me. But the question that I have is, do you know, or could you lend some credence to what I read in subsequent years, that the Giants were a good team, very good team. But one of the reasons they swept Cleveland was they were familiar with the Cleveland pitching staff because of spring training. They played Cleveland 20 times or something like that in spring training. And of course, in those days, there wasn't interleague play. But could you address that? Did you, in your research, did you come across that?
You know, when you talk about the 54 Giants, I also think about the 51 Giants. And I don't know, maybe they knew what pitches were coming. I don't know.
No,
But
Charlie, that's something we have a different view in this group about that. But what could you say? Did you in your research, did you ever come across anything?
all I
about
can say is
54?
I think they were, Cleveland came in with the big pitching staff and heavily favored, but the Giants were a pretty loaded team too. That was,
But
I mean,
the point is that the Giants were familiar with the pitching staff because they had seen them repeatedly
during the
spring
spring.
training.
Yeah. Well, back then they were just playing against each other all the time. Yeah, they were the first two teams out here, and it was just those two back and forth for many years.
Thanks, Charlie.
You're welcome.
Charlie, I meant to comment on your a comment about Jerry Grody. I totally agree with you. I loved watching him play defensive catcher. He was
Yeah.
the best catcher I ever saw, other than Johnny Bench defensively.
I think defensively, I think he was even better than Bench. I think Bench gets more recognition because of what he did with the bat. But I think Johnny Bench might tell you that Grody was a better catcher than he
Of
was.
all the Mets, I thought he was the most underrated.
Yeah.
Howard Manis, you were up.
Thanks, Charlie. Very good presentation. Just to
Thanks.
give you a frame of reference, I live in Jersey in the New York metropolitan area, and I have a 28-year-old son who's now a diehard Met fan. As a matter of fact, Gary, we're going opening day next Thursday. But for some reason, around the year 2012, 2013, he was a D-back fan. And I once asked him why, and he said because they're there. So anyway, he got good grades in high school. So during his spring break, which is this year's spring break is coming up now, I took him, we flew out together, the two of us, and we went to opening day. It happened to be against the Giants. And that was my first time seeing the D-backs, I believe. I was really impressed by the stadium. I've been in some really bad indoor stadiums. The one in Tampa Bay, the one that was in Montreal, and more bad things. But the one in Arizona, they opened up, I think during the batting practice, they had the roof closed. And it was an afternoon game, but then they opened it up and there was a fly show going on, airplanes, jets, the Star Spangled Banner, and all that kind of stuff. To me, what was most significant, it was the first game of the Giants' second championship season. And that's what I keep reminding me of. They started out in April, I think, I don't remember the exact date. And 6 months later, they were the world champions again. So I was glad to be at the very first game of that championship season. But I'll tell you one interesting story. I got into a nice conversation with an usher there. Real nice guy, does it part-time. He was complaining to me about the salary, being an usher at Chase Field. And he said, so we had to get a second job to supplement his income. I think he was an older guy, but not quite retired yet. So I didn't press him on it or anything. We didn't discuss anything else. The next night, it was an off day, no feedback game. So he went to see the Phoenix Suns play the Lakers, and there was that same usher, and he recognized us. And I said, so this is how you earn a living, huh? You bounce around from stadium to stadium. And he said, yeah, that's about it. He does the D-backs and he does the Phoenix Suns.
Well,
So,
for a while, they had the same ownership.
Yeah.
well, maybe
Terry
that's why.
Colangelo.
Well, this was in the year
Colangelo, right.
2012. So maybe that was at the time that they had the same
Yeah.
ownership.
Not by then, but in the beginning they did.
So we had
Yeah.
a second conversation with the same usher. The next day we went back to Chase Field for the next game of the opening series, and there was a guy again, and now I felt like we were old friends talking about it. So I'd never been to spring training in Arizona. I went to spring training in Florida a couple of times, living in the East. But it was interesting seeing Arizona play. And when we weren't at the ballpark or at the Phoenix Suns, we were out looking for rattlesnakes and scorpions. We went out to what was that famous architect who has a place?
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, we went to his place out there. So we enjoyed being in Phoenix. It was very, very hot, and it was only early April. But yeah, I came home with a nice sunburn. And one thing that did remind me of New York is we took the train there. The light rail stopped right outside our hotel, and I didn't even know they had a train in
Yeah,
Phoenix.
it's changed. Things have changed in Phoenix. I've been listening to trains the whole time we've been sitting here in Tucson, but those are different ones. Those
Well, I
are
grew
the
up-
freight trains and the Amtrak.
I grew up in the Bronx. I used to hear the trains in the background, and then I moved to Queens with my parents, and we had the planes going to LaGuardia or JFK, and of course, you know about Shea Stadium and now
Of
Citi
course.
Field,
Okay.
nothing but planes. So good presentation. I'm glad I got to Arizona. It wasn't for spring training, but I did see the Giants win. I don't remember if they even won that first game. I'd have to look at the ticket stub, but it was nice being out there to Phoenix and see Major League Ballpark.
Thank you,
Come
Howard.
again.
Thank you.
You
I'll
bet.
come
The
again.
guy who is just returning from Arizona, seeing the Giants, Bill Schiffner. Bill, you're up.
Charlie, this was a great presentation, and the timing on this was perfect. I'm a New Yorker that's still a Giants fan, even though I was born after the Giants moved. But my brother and my wife and my sister-in-law, we all met there, went to a couple of games and everything. I just had a couple of questions about the stadium. When was it finally? It looks very AT&T Park, a lot of Giant stuff. It's Oracle now. But when did they finally do the last renovation on the park?
On Scottsdale
Yeah,
Stadium?
Scottsdale Stadium.
They just did one in like 2000, I want to say in preparation for the 2020 season, which was completely cut short.
Right.
They had spent a whole bunch of money. They put a whole new clubhouse and administrative offices, this big building it's like a 10,000 square foot building down the right field line, which I don't even think I've ever stepped foot in that yet. I go all around it and do things, but I haven't found an occasion to be in there yet. They also added another deck to their party deck, the lodge, where they do the $150. You get all the food and drinks in the game, and so they added another layer to that, so they get more people in up there, and probably a few other little cosmetic things. I mean, the big difference was when it went from being wood to bricks. When it went from being the second Little Pig's house to being the third Little Pig's house. That was 1992. And that was, HOK, and you got the red brick and the green awnings, and it starts to look like Oriole Park and some of these other places. I think it was a hugely significant move in the history of the league, because that's when you saw that picture of Faye Vincent I showed, and they were thinking about leaving, and Cleveland had already gone to St. Pete, and Al Rosen and the Giants were threatening to go somewhere too. And the city of Scottsdale came up with $8 million, which is now sounds like nothing. These ballparks cost more than $100 million to build now, 130. But back then, $8 million got that ballpark built and saved the Giants for the city. And so really that was the big one. And, it's not as big as a lot of the other ballparks. And 1992 now is going back in time. It's like the third oldest ballpark in the league all of a sudden. Might even be the second oldest, depending, because nobody uses Phoenix Municipal Stadium anymore. ASU does. The oldest is Tempe Diablo Stadium, 1969. But every other park in the league has come along since then. So.
Well, anyway, it's a beautiful park. We had a great time. The Giants won
yeah.
one, they lost one, but we even got to go watch them practice. So we got to see Harrison warm up, got to see Dusty Baker walking around. We even saw Buster Posey drive up. So it was.
I saw Dusty Baker at breakfast yesterday.
It was great. But anyway, thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful.
Certainly.
Thanks, Bill. We got Steve and then Mars. Steve?
Charlie, this was a great presentation. I remember you did something like that for me, and you did a couple of others. For those that really don't know Charlie, although Bill Klink figured it out, he's got a lot of chutzpah, but he makes it work. I think you paid $1 for that bobblehead. I think you told me
$2, three.
All right,
It's worth 150.
three. Okay, Harvey,
Yeah.
this is not for debating. I don't want to go back and forth, but one thing that I don't know how many people realize in '54, the Giants win games 1 and game 2. The Giants flew to Cleveland a couple of hours. Cleveland took an all-night train. So they might have been a little bit tired because there was no days off. They played the next game, which was game 3. So that might have had a little something to do with it. You mentioned Bill Staples. I don't know how many years ago I had him as a speaker. Gary, you might think of him at some point.
He's
did
amazing.
a lecture on, I haven't seen him, it's got to be 15 years. He did a lecture on Kenichi Zenemura, the short little Japanese guy with Gehrig and Ruth
Yeah.
on each of his ends. Very knowledgeable guy on Japanese baseball.
Oh, he's fantastic.
He is.
Yep.
Did you ever get to the Stoneham estate? I thought you might have something.
I went to the ranch. That was his house that Jamie owned for a while on Camelback Road, not too far
Yeah.
from the Fashion Square Mall. She has since sold that place. But
Correct.
I'm
Twice.
thankful. Yeah, I'm thankful I got to at least go in there and see it. So yes,
Okay,
I
that
did.
was a great place to visit.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about the Arizona, basically the Arizona area, but the Angels also trained kind of in a remote spot for a couple of years, and that was Palm Springs, which is
Yeah.
very similar to Yuma. Why Palm Springs? But that was a short time. The Francisco Grande, for the Bill, I'm sorry you didn't do it while you were here during spring training, unless you're still out here. That's a place to take a ride to in Casa Grande. It's not that far. It's maybe an hour and 15 minutes. Just that pool in the shape of a bat. And if you walk through the hotel, there's still a lot of Giant memorabilia. At least there was.
Yeah, they did. They got a lot
2020,
of photographs on the wall. They acknowledge the hotel's history when you're there.
They do.
Yeah.
Now, on a sidebar, there's a guy who lives here in Grand. His father was the interior decorator for that hotel.
Wow.
And early on, when they were decorating, the guy that lives here, the older brother is close to 90 now, they were in the lobby, and Stoneham told the father, have your son take that man on a tour. Well, that man was John Wayne. That's quite it. And John Wayne's got that place, I guess, just
I've stayed
down
in
the
the
road.
John Wayne suite at Francisco Grande before. I've stayed in the room.
That's correct. And just one last thing. Charlie was really very much responsible for the 2017 Cactus League luncheon. I attended. There was a lot of people there, including Monty Irvin's daughter, Chris DeRocha, Jamie Rupert. It was a wonderful tribute to the African Americans. And like Charlie said, Mays was the only one alive, and he paid a tribute to the other 3, Dobie, Monty Irvin, and Ernie Banks. The 2 things I remember about Mays' presentation, and he was beat up that morning because
Yeah.
he drove in from Palm Springs. He was starving. He ate before it started, but he talked about his own experiences driving his car home. Mays had a place, still has it, off of Cactus and Frank Lloyd Wright. He's driving home and he's stopped by a cop. What are you doing on Shea Boulevard? He says, I play for the Giants. I'm going home. Don't drive down this street anymore. So that kind of hit home a little bit. But the second story is very humorous. He talked about Ernie Banks. Ernie Banks came over to Willie Mays his rookie year and he introduced himself. I'm Ernie Banks. And Mays said, I know you are. I know who you are. You're the guy that says, let's play 2. How about we play 1 and we kick your ass? Do you remember that, Charlie? Anyway, this was a great presentation. The pictures are priceless. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Mars, you're up.
Oh, Charlie, that was great. Thank you for joining us. I want to show you something that you'll recognize. This jersey.
Oh yeah, I
Can
did.
you
I
see
saw
it?
you in. I saw you when we were looking at the screen before. I love it. I have one of those too.
Yeah. So did they have to give up the Colt 45s because of the Colt Gun Company? Is that what you
The
said?
gun company told him you can't use our name. That's our
Oh.
product.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have a few questions and statements. Why Arizona? Because it's dry air instead of the Florida humidity?
I mean, I think that's part of the reason. I think the weather in general is just better. It's not going to, yeah, it's definitely not going to rain as much. The whole baseball map was moving in that direction. When you think of all the teams that are now west of the Mississippi, it was just beginning. Stoneham, and really, you know what it was? Well, you know this already. Stone moved to San Francisco because he knew people were going to start driving to the ballpark and they had no place to park at the polo grounds. So the same thing. You had all this undeveloped land, all this available real estate, all these places that it was just a blank canvas. And there was some baseball history. There was mining leagues down in Bisbee and Tombstone and all around. One of the projects we're working on with our baseball legacy and experience, the museum project, we're coming up with something called the Arizona Baseball Trail, and we're trying to find places, old historic ballparks. Fort Huachuca in Sierra Vista, Arizona, way down south. It was an all-black regiment. There was an all-black team that had guys who used to play in the Negro Leagues on that team down there. So there was baseball. That was like post-Civil War, and even during the Civil War, there was baseball being played in different parts, remote parts of this state for decades. And so it does. The field I went and looked at today, I don't know how old it was. I'm going to say it was maybe a 60 or 70-year-old field in this little town of Tubac. And it makes me wonder if anybody, and I don't know this yet, I was just scratching the surface today, if anybody who ever played on that field went on to play in any kind of professional league, or what kind of tournaments might have been taking place there. Bisbee, the Warren Ballpark in Bisbee, all sorts of major leaguers have played down there, and it's got a real storied history that they still tap into. So
what is
Arizona wasn't, it was a place.
What is Ho Ho Camp named? Who is Ho Ho Camp? What's it named after?
That's Native people. The Hohokam tribe is Native Americans, and literally translated, it means those who have gone. They disappeared. It may have been a blight or a plague or some disease brought in by the European settlers, but that whole tribe disappeared, the Hohokam. And that's so it's a word you see attached to a lot of things here in Arizona still.
Whatever happened to Casa Grande?
Well, the Francisco Grande I was talking about, it's still a hotel. They still have a golf course there, but also the soccer teams, the world soccer teams, use it as a training facility. As a bunch of grass now, and the ruins of the Casa Grande ruins, that building I showed you, that's like 1,400 years old, and it's still there. You can still tour those grounds. You know what else they had in Arizona was the ball courts. I don't know if you know about the Native American ball courts. These were like games they played to the death. If you won, they cut your head off and put it on a trophy.
I know. It was in Mayan ruins. I saw that in
they have that
Mexico.
here.
Wow. I went to Yuma.
Charlie, wasn't part of the problem with Casa Grande the fact that it was so remote, it was hard to get tourists to come out there. That place is way the hay out of Casa Grande and a long way from the interstate.
Well,
talk about remoteness. I was in Yuma.
Gentlemen, one at a time, please.
I was in Yuma, and I did see the prison, and it reminded me of the song 310. There is a lonely train called a 310 to Yuma. I couldn't imagine playing baseball in that heat. But anyway, there's two more things I wanted to mention. That's television and movies. The Honeymooners you mentioned. But do you remember in The Godfather, when Sonny got to the toll booth, the Giant Dodger 51 playoff game where Thompson hit the homer was going on, being played in that movie on the radio.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of thanks again. That was very enjoyable.
All right. We're gonna you Met fans, the Mets signed JD Martinez. Jim Mully, you're gonna wrap it up tonight.
Thanks. Charlie, just want to let you know I'm in Western New York, and a friend of mine's been in Scottsdale for the last couple of weeks. He called me yesterday to tell me about this great exhibit he was looking at, and he sent me pictures, and it was the one that you showed today. So I wanted to know people are enjoying it. I sent it to a couple of the guys here, and the photos I sent yesterday
that warms my heart. Good to hear.
So that was really nice. Bill Klink, if you still got that 1970 Cleveland ball, I think you can sell it to Norm because Sam McDowell's on there, and I'm not sure Norm's got Sam's autograph. He'll get it.
Al Dark should be on there too.
Okay. And the last thing, the nice thing, I've been at spring training once, and one of the things I really enjoyed about it was the former players who would be out in the lobby area, basically just sitting down selling autographs. But I saw Gaylord Perry there, and there was like no one around him. I sat down with him for 15 minutes and had a real nice conversation with him. I saw Daryl Evans there one year. So it's kind of a nice experience to get to see the former players there. But just wanted to let you know if people enjoyed that exhibit. Thank you.
Charlie,
Thanks.
just a great job. And one recommendation is when you get the schedule for next year, send it out to me. I'll send it out to everybody because, like I said, a lot of guys go to Arizona for spring training. Bill, of course. And you never know who you might pick up a person or two.
Yeah, I look at the group today and I was thinking you could be a Rhodes Scholar, you could be a Rhodes Scholar. You know, I think that we're like-minded communities and, you know, there's some overlap in all these endeavors, the museum people, the Rhodes Scholar people, everybody, we all have this in common, you know.
And plus the guys you spoke about have all Zoomed with us. So we're, you know, very familiar with these guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, guys, why don't we give it up for Charlie Vascellaro? Charlie, don't be a stranger, okay? Hop
You
on
got
if
it, guys.
you find an interesting program. We
Okay.
will meet each other next Wednesday with Roger Munter. Great reports on the Giants farm system. Until then, I will stop the recording. Anybody wants to talk about the Giants for a few minutes, we will do that. Have a great night. We'll see each other next Wednesday. Good night, everybody.
Good night.